Infrastructure is crumbling and the problems are only getting worse. The pressure to find solutions is hot. Let's talk about why American cities have no water, no electricity, and no money to fix their infrastructure problems. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast, hosted by Chad Smeltzer.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. Today's guest is Natalie Deroock, who is the Senior Public Information Officer with Tucson, Arizona. Thanks for joining me, Natalie.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Chad.
I love your last name. I was saying Deroock, but it's a really cool, powerful last name. I love it. So, thanks for joining me and being a part of the audience and sharing your knowledge about public information. As we don't really know a lot in civil infrastructure about what a public information officer does. So this is going to be great to hear from you and understand more of your background. So how did all this start? How did you get into public information? What made you want to do that?
Well, it's an interesting story. When I was a lot younger, I was an academic. I was studying education and policy, global policy. And to make a very long story short, I had been traveling overseas quite a bit for academic research, and an opportunity popped up for my husband and myself at the time to move to Singapore and to move to Asia. I had been doing a ton of research there anyways. He became a professor, and I wasn't so sure that academia was my calling. I was a bit more of a wallflower, and I ended up being recruited and taking a position in foreign affairs with the U.S. Department of State to work on some of their education pieces. And that falls smack dab in the middle of public affairs and soft power diplomacy. And so when I fell into that position, I was really flattered. I mean, it's just such a wonderful organization. Everything that we do, we don't always see the wonderful things that the U.S. does abroad.
Right.
We often, catch wind of the media, and there's a lot of critique there. But I was able to be a part of a really wonderful team where I learned about communications and public affairs strategy, and I got pushed into doing more public speaking. And so I did that for several years. Then, as we all know, COVID hit and people wanted to be closer to their families. It was definitely time for me to come back to the U.S., came back to my hometown, which is Tucson. It was like, wow, what am I going to do now? I have all these wonderful diplomacy skills and I've become a very astute communicator. Where is that going to fit? And things happen in the right place at the right time. The position with Tucson Water, the City of Tucson municipal water provider, opened up. I applied and I took the position and haven't looked back. It's been wonderful. I serve as a senior public information officer, but my background is as a communications strategist. And so what that means is that I am pushing public information to our stakeholders, to the public, working with our elected officials, and really helping push the utility forward and building trust and transparency, but also helping push policy pieces forward through the use of our multiple media channels and launching some of our campaigns.
Great explanation. That's one of the things that, what a strategist does versus a public information officer. Way to break that down. That's very helpful. I saw that public engagement specialist, that was some of your background there. What is there a difference between that and like a public information officer? Or are they very similar?
Yeah, no, I would say a specialist is very green. It's okay. Like it's an entry level position. You kind of go specialist to, in some cases, people go coordinator, and you just kind of move up that chain of progression.
Okay.
So I started out as a specialist. So, and I did it very non-traditionally, right? I didn't do it right out of college. I did it after I was working on a PhD and was like, oh, I don't know if this is the right thing for me. Yeah. And, everybody in the world was like, you've got to finish the PhD. You're almost done. And I was like, I don't know, so I took that leave of absence and didn't completely exit the program. But when I did that, and then I thought, okay, I'm entering as a specialist. Like this seems really kind of basic. But the thing about it is that there's so much to learn. And if you have a curious mind and you're willing to say yes to lots of things to really build up and upskill yourself,
Mhm.
then it's pretty easy to get on that chain of progression and just kind of move your career in a direction that you enjoy, and you just take opportunities. So started out as a specialist, and now I'm the senior officer for the utility.
Got it. Got it. And your international experience that you had um, has kind of helped fulfill like this role that you're in now, from the way it sounds. Is there a difference in dealing with like public in America versus internationally? Like what is that kind of like?
Yeah. Well, I've lived and worked in a lot of different countries, Singapore being the longest. But what I would say is that we're very fortunate here in the United States to be able to have um, such freedom of speech and freedom of press in so many ways. Uh, so that is certainly helpful in telling the story of a water utility. I went from working in foreign affairs uh, and working with really diverse group of people. And I guess one thing about me is I am absolutely a cross-cultural communicator. So people with different backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds, different religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. I'm always looking for that common denominator and a way to really negotiate and match people up in their interests and in some of the goal setting that they do. I mean, that's always been the cornerstone of being a strategist,
Yeah.
is bringing people together and making sure that we are communicating in a very transparent and open way to build trust. And so when I look at that skill set that I was working with in foreign affairs and bringing that over to water, I mean, in water, we're dealing with, well, the two questions we get asked all the time here are, is there enough water to drink because of the longstanding drought? And then the second question is the water safe to drink?
Mm.
And in both of those cases, my role is to help reassure the public that we do have enough water to drink because of smart water planning in the Tucson area. Our mayor and council have been very proactive for decades in making sure that we're well prepared, and as well as working in tandem with the water leadership. Um, but also being transparent with the public that we do have really great quality water, and explaining to people, taking very complex ideas and simplifying that. So, I always say, my 84-year-old grandmother, I'd like it if she could understand what it is that we do in water. And that's my goal.
That's great. Yeah, we need water education, 100%, all across the board.
Mhm.
Different culture backgrounds that come to the United States, and we're all immigrants, that come here. So it's great to have
Mhm.
your ability to communicate that across your channels and stuff that you have going on. So what are you hearing now as talking about water just in general, because there's so much going on with
Mhm.
water, with PFAS and just
Mhm.
the lead issues out in Flint years ago. There's a lot of
Mhm.
concerns with those kind of things. How are you handling that kind of stuff these days?
Well, you know, being a good communicator is as much, and it's cliche, but it's as much about listening as it is communicating.
Yeah.
So it's really important for me to keep my finger on the pulse about what people are saying on the ground, like what the word of mouth um, is about, water and water quality. Also, looking at the ways that the media frames issues like water quality and in a lot of cases drought, and looking at keywords and what they do to communicate a story. And we all know that with the media, they're there to tell the story and to be transparent, but oftentimes it's fear that fear factor that really gets the attention, and there's a lot more of that than I think needs to be there, at least in the case with Tucson, Arizona. So what we know
Yeah.
here is that locally there have been issues with water quality for a variety of reasons. And so my job, I really view myself as a conduit between the utility and the public to help people understand the proactive measures that the city and the water utility have been taking to make sure the water is safe and secure, and to really not just give a superficial explanation about why that is, but to help people understand some of those more complex concepts in what happens, in the water quality lab, and what happens throughout the distribution system, and how that translates into water that is good and great to drink coming out of your tap.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's good because a friend of mine who talks about media communication. He's in the water space. Mike McGill.
Mhm.
He's pretty advocate on getting out ahead of it and
Mhm.
communicating to your audience, your constituents, getting it out there before it becomes a bigger problem is
Mhm.
always a proactive way of dealing with things before it's kind of too late and everybody starts
Mhm.
spreading the rumor mill and then it's unleashed.
Then you're in trouble.
Yeah, then you're in trouble, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is that people will talk. The media will carry a story no matter what that is. And so it is important to get out in front of it. And instead of being reactive, I mean, many water utilities are short staffed, right? Like workforce development is really an issue for a lot of water utilities across the country. It feels like we cannot recruit enough people to fill the roles that we currently have. Um, but you know, if there's one thing I could communicate to people, it's that having a very skilled, very strategic thinking public information officer, or better yet, a public affairs team, hiring in and really investing in that helps so much with what happens behind the scenes and the kind of support and funding that we get for water projects across the board, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that we've worked on here at Tucson Water is making sure that instead of just being reactive to media inquiries, oh no, there's a main break or something else happens, we're cultivating relationships with the media so that they feel that they can come to us and ask us questions and they have that background knowledge about what it takes to run a water system so that when we do have a crisis and we do have to go into crisis communications mode, we have those relationships established.
Okay.
They're trusting relationships and they're very transparent relationships. And so that's something that we've done. The other thing that we've done here at the utility, and this is funny because people are like, oh, it's just the fun job or it's not that important, but it's really unifying the brand of
Mm,
the utility. So for us, we're nested under the city of Tucson. We are one department with the city of Tucson. So we follow those city guidelines for branding. But one thing about the city of Tucson, Arizona, is that it's a very kind of grassroots, very kind of DIY, authentic community. It's a big city, but it feels like a small town. And people are very proud of our shared cultural heritage of water conservation. I mean,
awesome.
we have a history that goes back 4,000 years. So, one of the things that we've done here is to unify people with this shared purpose, which they were already doing, but talking about water conservation in ways that they can practically conserve without compromising quality of life.
Mm,
And so, as we give people actionable steps to practice water conservation, they're also very curious about what the utility is doing on the whole. So, we're able to pivot with that branding, launch appropriate campaigns for our community. But then also recently we were able to, our mayor and council very graciously passed our One Water 2100 plan
mm,
for the community, which is a holistic look at how we use our four water sources. All sources of water have value. And in Tucson, I'm kind of skipping around here, but it all gets to
okay.
one place.
Yeah.
So bear with me. So in Tucson, we're a US EPA designated sole source aquifer, which means we only have groundwater here. And we supplement that with Central Arizona Project water, which is a major aqueduct that brings water down from the Colorado River. And what was really important to us is making sure that we're being authentic with our community here about our water resources and our water quality, but also allowing our stakeholders, our business community and our residential community, the opportunity to help participate in long-term water resource planning. And so we launched that One Water 2100 campaign, and it's really just been not just about being less reactive, but also being very proactive and very dedicated to building and sustaining relationships. And that's probably the biggest part of public information that people don't see. But one of the biggest benefits that a very strong public information officer can bring, or a team preferably can bring to a utility or a service provider.
Yeah, that's important, those relationships, because that's something I wouldn't have put two and two together. Been like, oh, well, you're just controlling that. You're managing the media. You're making sure you're getting stuff out in the head of people, so they understand what's going on. So there's not this crisis that could come out of it, with
Mhm.
misinformation, that happens and stuff like that. So that's
Mhm.
interesting. When you talk about relationships with the media. That's really unique. Was there a particular situation, talking about crisis communication? Was there any story or a particular situation you came up with that or had to deal with there in Tucson?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's been a couple. I mean, who doesn't love a great main break?
Oh, those are
Right?
those are
If you
peaches.
have a water main right? If you have a water main break and that's like the media loves it, right? There's water shooting 30 feet up in the air, the streets flooded, and cars are having to divert their routes. Um, we do of course deal with our fair share of crisis communications and crises that come up. Um, we're having to deal with that all the time. And again, it gets back to having great relationships with the media, with also external stakeholders, and making sure that we're also communicating effectively with our elected officials to keep everybody in the loop, in the know, and having that personal touch. I wasn't at Tucson Water at this time, but I think a lot of people around the country look to Detroit for some of their water quality issues that they had and a learning lesson there. But in Tucson, we also had um, a pretty intensive learning lesson with water quality several years back, and that was with our Central Arizona Project Water. Um, the Central Arizona Project is a 350-mile long aqueduct that brings, Colorado River water to Central Arizona and beyond. And so Tucson had its shipment of water that came through, um, went out to a treatment plant to the far west of the city. And everybody was excited because we were able to supplement our groundwater and it was going to get, pumping and going. And suddenly, it was just such a wonderful addition to the city's water resources. And when people turned on their taps, when it started pumping through, um, water from people's taps came out red and brown. And I remember I was in college when this happened, and I lived in an area that was particularly affected. And it was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Um, and so that was something that the water utility, much before my time, had to deal with. I remember it as a member of the public and what that was like and what that crisis management was like. But there's a book, and I usually have it on my desk, but I don't see it here. It's called Tucson Water Turnaround.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful book about how this crisis, this water quality crisis, and also just a PR nightmare.
Sounds right.
um, yeah, it was pretty rough for the city. It was pretty scandalous, and the water utility, with the support of mayor and council, were able to turn this situation around and really make it a learning lesson. And I will say that when I'm out at conferences or I'm on other speaking engagements, myself or the directors, we are very consistently asked about how we turn that into a success. So other cities do look to that crisis moment as something that they can learn from. So again, that book is called Tucson Water Turnaround, and um, you can find that on the AWWA
AWA, yeah.
website in the bookstore. Yeah,
Got
they
it.
have that there.
Yeah, American
Yeah.
Water Works Association. It's a great organization. So glad you brought that up. But yeah, the flushing of hydrants, obviously, when you get a water source, and if you don't flush the hydrants, from what I know, obviously everything comes out brown if it's been sitting there for a while. And that sounds like exactly
Mhm.
what happened. They didn't
Uh-huh.
get a chance to flush it all out, and then it went right to the taps, and that's never good. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that can be
Yeah.
brutal. How about
Yeah.
cross cultural communications? Can you talk a little bit on that? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. When I say that, a lot of times what comes to mind for people is just like talking to people of different cultures and making sure that they're getting information and maybe offering any kind of pamphlets or brochures in English and Spanish. And
Got
that's like a small piece of it. One thing that I've been able to bring to the utility is a pretty strong knowledge in the fact that people process information differently,
Oh yeah.
even basic information. And so when we're developing any kind of resource for the utility, it's important for us, for my team, to recognize different types of learners, I guess you could call it. Some people are very receptive to audio learning, right? They love a good podcast. If they hear something read, they retain that.
Yep.
Other people are visual. They're more receptive to things like infographics and just really interesting graphics or color coding, those sorts of things. And other people, like myself, are kinesthetic. I mean, if you hand me a book of instructions, I'm going to chuck it out the window and probably just sit down and try and build the piece of furniture kind of intuitively.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I retain knowledge through action. And so that is something that has been prevalent throughout my career, is to really understand that cross-cultural communication doesn't just mean bringing together people of other cultures, but different ways of understanding and interacting with the world. So I would say if you, it's particularly important, I would say, for a water utility or a service provider, because, well, we have a lot of engineers and people who are very introverted and very focused on, and I love you guys. If you're watching this, please, nobody get mad at me, but people who are very focused on their task at hand in front of them. And there's not always an easy way for them to communicate out to the public in ways that other people will understand. I think we all get in our little bubbles with whatever it is that we're explaining, but the role of a cross-cultural communicator and a strong public information office is to make sure that anything that you deliver is digestible to a variety of people, whether they're neurodivergent or not neurodivergent, or they're English speakers or not English speakers, or non-native English speakers. I mean, it runs the gamut, but just making sure that there's a good method for getting that information out there, and so that it's digestible. And I think what's really cool right now is we're in a time where you can just get onto your whatever browser you're using to get on the web. You can search up anything and you can have it translated into almost any language that you want. Like, how lucky are we to have that? So I try to bring that forward in any of the materials my team creates.
Yeah, no, that's a great explanation, examples of that, because you're right. Reading comprehension, if that can be a problem for some people, right? They can visually watch a video and process it much faster. I think there was a study, it was like 68% can be digested just watching video, like how to do things, right? It's just easier to digest the information, so to speak, and process it.
Yeah. And, this year, I think people who are, at water utilities are particularly aware of the new US EPA water quality regulations that are coming down the way, right? Like, we just had the new PFAS MCLs announced. The lead and copper revised rule is, ready. A lot of people have that rolling out, that program. And then we have the compliance deadline. I think it's on October 16th of this year. And I've been calling this the water quality year. And I think there's nothing out there that brings more fear to people and more question marks and more puzzled stares than water quality issues, especially if we start, using the full names of all of these different compounds that are in PFAS or, any other number of things. It's
Don't look it up. Yeah, right.
Yeah, like, utilities suck, like that. People come away with that, and it's like, no, we don't have to talk about it that way. Like, we can frame it in a way that really people who don't have that scientific background can understand what these things are, what utilities and what service providers, what actions they're taking to really benefit the community, et cetera. So that's super important. It
is nowadays.
Super important cross-cultural communication, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, it looks like in your background, you did some youth work and, civic engagement at some point in time. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? What the younger generation, like what you're doing?
Yeah. Right now, all I'm doing is raising teenagers. And I think that's about enough youth engagement for me.
You and me both. We didn't even get to talk about this. We'll have to talk about that, but go ahead.
That's like a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But throughout my career, it's been really important to engage with youth because I love it. They're very invigorating for me, youth of all ages. because they oftentimes have a perspective that we as adults don't have, and they can ask a simple question, but it kind of turns on that light bulb for everybody else. And they have fresh ways of looking at things and dealing with issues, and they're not afraid. They haven't been jaded by by all the complexities of the world. But in the past, I have worked on youth engagement projects, I think my entire career. I was very involved in uh, getting people to register to vote in my early years. That being part of a really strong democratic process is important. It takes people to get out, vote, voice their opinion,
Right.
and just be an active participant in that. That was really driven home for me by living overseas and seeing, visiting countries and places that are, quote unquote democracies, um, where people cannot express their public opinion, and even mentioning a politician's name out loud
Right.
gets some stares, and it's something you just can't do. And it really drives home the fact that we live in an incredible country, and this country is based on democracy. Imperfect, nothing is perfect,
Right.
but the fact that youth are really, really critical to maintain that political process and all the special things that we have here. So youth, I've been very engaged in youth in civic leadership. When I was overseas, I also worked with a government there to help train youth to go on different missions within the region, and to help financially plan and set up action plans for those missions out, to help build very basic infrastructure in a multitude of countries.
Nice.
And that was awesome. That
Yeah.
also required a lot of camping out in the jungle.
Oh, that's a story.
And we kind of roughed it for a few days and then went back and drew up the plans for their mission. But yeah, that was pretty fun. It was like some of that survivalist training
Yeah.
that I got as a kid, I was using as an adult in the jungles of Southeast Asia. So
Wow.
there's a lot more there, but I
I'm
don't want to
sure.
go on about that.
Yeah. No, that sounds intriguing. That's a whole nother podcast. So see, you got to start a
Yeah.
podcast, Natalie. Just start talking about your experiences. It sounds like, yeah, you could share a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're kind of getting towards the end, of the
Mhm.
podcast here. So what does the future of public information look like? I have a lot more questions for you, but obviously, with time wise, what does the future look
Mhm.
like?
Yeah, the future of public information. What an interesting time we're in right now with workforce development issues, also, economic development issues across the board in the US. Um, Also, like the advent of AI.
Hmm.
I mean, there's so many pieces to that puzzle, but what I will say is that I would hope that utilities, water service providers, other government entities, whether they're municipal, federal, et cetera, really, really hone in and find the funding to have properly staffed, strategic, strong public information or public affairs team.
Yeah.
If you have that, you will definitely have great community support. You will have great relationships with the public, elected officials, and media. And when you have all of those positive pieces, all of that positive momentum going forward, it makes it a lot easier um, to knock out any project that you may have, and also find funding to be able to do that. It just really, I always call public information, at least at the utility, the grease in the gears. People don't always see what we do. They'll see like a letter or a flyer or a website update,
Mhm.
but the stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management pieces, those relationships are so critical. And when you invest in a public information team and you get people out engaged with the community, engaged with elected officials, engaged with the business community, you really have a strong area that can support all of the other divisions or sections of that utility or that business. So I would hope that with the advent of AI, that maybe makes some of what we do a little bit more efficient.
Yeah.
you can never replace relationship building with AI. There's that interpersonal piece, and I think the future is bright, and I'd like to see more growth. So,
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, for sure. You see all the social media platforms that, can be utilized now. And there's so many ways to, put things out there on the, I guess, platform. I was going to say platform, but online, just on the web, right? Just out there. And, there's so many different avenues that we can put out content. So using AI, like you said, to kind of help us streamline the process is going to be unique, I think, in the future too. But I am curious. I do have one more question. What do you think about social media, just in general, before we?
Oh, that's a good
Yeah,
question,
you weren't ready for that one, so I just threw it out
there. What do I think of social media? Social media is one of those things, like from a marketing perspective and a trust building perspective, it's very helpful. It's a wonderful tool, but it is a tool, and it is a tool that is owned by another entity. So if, a lot of businesses, a lot of places solely rely on a couple of social media platforms, right? The main ones being LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And when you solely rely or put too much emphasis on one or two of those, you really limit yourself, because ultimately the company, whether it's Meta or X or whatever it is that owns that platform, ultimately owns that information. And that's why it's really important to utilize social media, but realize it can change at the drop of a hat, and you've got to be able to pivot off of it. So if someone, I'm going to give a recommendation, I hope that's okay, but if someone is looking to market their business, or they're looking to really get the message out, you have to know who your target audience is, what that age range and demographic is, and who is going to be most effective for you to communicate with, to get that message out and garner business or do whatever it is that you need to do. And then you need to understand, with all of social media, who is the largest population using that particular platform, right? So for Facebook, it's a little bit older. My kids call Facebook archaic. There's Instagram, but they mostly use like Snapchat. There's so many platforms. But also taking stock of, like, if someone's marketing or, any kind of public information team will know, you have to have traditional sources, right? Written sources, newspapers, magazines, etc. And then you balance that out with your digital content. And social media is fun, but it can be a black hole. There can be a lot of negativity on that. And it just really depends on what you're using it for. But if you're going to use it for marketing purposes or building a reputation with the public, go for it. But just be sure to pay attention to your other platforms and your other media channels in a very precise way, so you know who you're talking to and when.
That's a great way to describe it, because you're exactly right. Whatever's on those platforms is controlled by those platforms, and having a traditional source like your own website, your own channel, to control anything that could be done on that side. I see where you're going with that one. It makes a lot of sense to have your own source versus, whatever else is controlled on those social platforms. So great information. I appreciate your time. This is really enlightening of what a public information officer actually does. So I didn't know exactly everything, but I have a feeling you and I could talk about a bunch of different things. Kids, one of the things. I have teenagers too. It's the same thing, Snapchat, all this stuff. They got me using it. But so this is great. I appreciate your time here, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, good to be here. I really enjoyed it. And let me know if you want to chat about anything else or talk about adventures.
It definitely could happen. That's for sure. So, well, thank you, Natalie, for being here. And I appreciate everything you do and what you're doing for the city of Tucson. It's amazing.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Infrastructure Hot Seat podcast. We hope that this show brought you some insight on relevant topics within the infrastructure world. Please join us every 2 weeks on Tuesday for the next episode. If you're interested in being a guest on this podcast, please set up a 15-minute interview with your host at calendly.com/Chad Smeltzer.